All right, so today on Kindled, I'm chatting with Bob Scott. Bob, thank you for joining me today.
Well, I'm glad to be here.
Tonight, it is evening as we are recording.
That is true. As we look out our windows, it is dark out
It is
there.
black as night. So
So is this a coffee chat, like a late night coffee
yeah,
chat? Is that what we're
I
doing?
could use coffee, but I shouldn't because it's 8 o'clock and I
All
don't want to be
right.
up till 1 a.m. But yeah,
Okay.
why don't you introduce yourself to listeners for anyone who has not heard of you?
Well, my name is Bob Scott. I am the author of a book called In the Company of Joseph When the Past Becomes the Future. I do a few blogs and podcasting and a few things like that. But my passion is the moment that we're in, which is something I've been waiting for quite some time. So we're at an exciting time, even though for some people I think they're a little nervous.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I think that would describe a great many people.
No,
Um,
I'm glad we're doing this. You know, one thing I just want to say to you is I'm grateful that you want to talk about this subject, because of the fact that your generation, more so than mine, is really going to be impacted by what's developing and how it's developing and where it's going. And so
mhm,
I know your generation aren't big readers; they're more podcast and
mhm.
this kind of thing. So I
Consumers, right?
appreciate the opportunity just to sit down and dialogue with you. So as we go through this tonight, feel free to ask me any questions you want because I'm hoping at the end of it, there'll be some understanding. Maybe we can clear some things up and help
Mhm.
people kind of understand where things are going.
Well, that's what I'm here to do is ask you questions. So since you just mentioned understand what's developing, why don't you you've got an interesting book title In the Company of Joseph. Why don't you kind of give listeners the high level view, if you would like, of what your book is about and what it is that you see that is developing?
Well, I'll tell you a little secret about the book that not many people know, which is the fact that the beginning of the book was written after the end of the book.
Mhm. Mm.
And the reason for that is that I have had a passion for 30 years. I have spent my life working with athletes, people in the arts and entertainment world, people in the geopolitical sector, and people in the business world, who I call the Josephs. And what my message to them has been is that while within the church world, there's sort of been this myopic view that most of what God does happens in church through people in the ministry, it's exactly the opposite. In fact, most of what God does actually happens outside of church through people not in the ministry. And I use Joseph as a type. Joseph
Mhm.
for me is a biblical figure that sort of typifies what I'm talking about. And all through history, in hours of crisis, God always raises up these type of people. Um, and so we're
Mhm.
in a stage right now in terms of history and what's unfolding that we're going through rapid change quickly. So what happened with the book is that was writing about the Josephs, and my colleague Brad Cummings, who was the ghostwriter and publisher for a book called The Shack, got all excited about the manuscript, and he said to me, there's something you're not talking about. Like there's something missing in this book, and it's like there's a reason why you think these Josephs are going to play a
Mhm.
very significant role in the days ahead. And I said to him, yeah, but I don't want to write about that. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, I really don't want to write about what I see coming because of the fact that it'll make the book, it'll switch the focus around from the Josephs to, I'm afraid people will start thinking like this is another late great planet Earth or one of these sort of end time books. And I don't want the focus to be on that. And he goes, no, I disagree with you. So we had a big fight for about 6 months over that. And he ended up winning. So I actually went back and wrote. Now, what's interesting is there's I don't know, people, a lot of people said the book is prophetic. Well, it may be. I'll let other people figure that out for themselves. But one of the things that I learned years ago, and it actually came through a dream. And in this dream, I saw this hand reach the top of and open up the top of my head and drop a seed in. And I was all excited for what that seed contained. And then I opened my mouth, and little seed popped out and fell into the ground and didn't do anything. And I was so disappointed. And I was like, well, but that thing had so much potential.
Mm.
And then a few minutes or some period of time went by, and the same dream happened again. And the top of my head opened up, and that seed got dropped in. But this time, I found myself doing that pose of the thinker, the statue of the thinker.
Mhm.
And I pondered for a while. And when I opened my mouth, a whole tree slid out. And I realized that wherever this dream came from, there was a truth in it, which is that when God shows you things, you really need to hold them for a while and let them mature. And so, what I did with the book is I had been holding on to the things that I had been seeing for quite some time. And then when I sat down and wrote, what I decided to do was, instead of just kind of spew out a bunch of information that had no context, I decided to go and research. And so I
Mhm.
spent 4 months hiding away in Branson, Missouri, digging to find it, if I could find any clues to give people tangible proof about what I was talking about. So what makes the book interesting is it not only sort of is a prognostication of what's coming. I actually show you in the book actual proof that it's already here. Like, there are things happening now.
Mhm.
What happened last year was the book came out in February, and there was a lot of pushback against it. And then the pandemic hit. And while I never really, I never predicted there was a pandemic coming. And so, I've said to people, I didn't see
Mhm.
any pandemic, but what I'm aware of is that crisis has a way of pushing technology forward.
Mhm.
It
We've heard that even
accelerates.
this year that it accelerated like the digital space by, I don't know, like 5 to 15 years or something,
Oh
just
my
in terms
God.
of
It
technology.
I mean, we just went into hyperspace.
Mhm.
And that's what happened. And we're not going to ever go back.
Right.
And that's something that people have to realize. Um, there's a you know Paul, the Hebrew writer, who was proficient in Greek, used the word logos, and logos meant all knowing. But he actually borrowed that from a Greek philosopher by the name of Heraclitus. And Heraclitus actually had another kind of interesting quote. And his quote was, "The only constant is change."
Mhm.
And that's the hour we live in. People have to understand as much as we like to feel secure in the predictable, we're moving into a time when the change is going to be accelerating. And that's
Mhm.
something that I know has got a lot of people unnerved. But what technology, the type of technology that has been developed in the last few years and is in development now, is going to accelerate change
Mhm.
rapidly. The cycle of change is gonna flip fast. That's
Right.
something we have to get ready for.
So you mentioned at the beginning kind of how God has always raised up people like Joseph that operate outside of the church body to actually kind of move history forward, I guess, in a way. So that aspect of, the title is clear, but what is the book really about? Like, if you could just kind of give people, in a couple sentences, what is your your overarching thesis, I guess, if you had to put
Well,
it
what I'm
into
trying to
a
get
sentence.
people to understand is we are standing on the threshold of unparalleled change, both in scope and speed. So the speed of which change is coming and the scope of influence is unparalleled. It's never happened in human history.
Mhm.
Never.
In terms of technology alone or in other
Technology, just
aspects?
technology, but technology is going to impact literally every aspect of our life.
Mhm.
That usually, when you tell people that, of course, some get excited. I mean, and I talk about that in the book. There's a whole personality type that's sort of their nostrils flare and they get excited because they see
Mhm.
opportunity. There's another whole group of people that get scared by that because they feel safe in the status quo.
Yeah, I don't
But
get
all through
excited by that.
history and the sort of the testimony of the biblical narrative is that in these hours of crisis, God always raises up people.
Mhm.
And I believe very, very strongly that what is about to happen, or what is happening and is going to continue to happen, that um, that what God wants to do is bring alternative solutions. That He wants to raise up Josephs. See what's happened in the Christian community is that we've become so focused sort of on church and building churches and stuff like that that we've just defaulted a lot of things.
Yeah. Mhm.
And we've just
In
let
culture
go
and
of a lot of
society.
things and
Yeah.
soon, that what those guys out there, well, what's happened is, to use an, a cliche statement, we're caught with our pants down right now.
Mm.
We're in a situation where there just isn't a bunch of alternatives. So the good news is, and I can't really discuss this here because these are all very, very. Um, it's just important that I don't talk about. But I will just say this: that I am keenly aware in the last 12 months that exactly what I predicted in the book is starting to happen. There are people out there who are looking at old things in new ways and coming up with some very, very innovative tech solutions that will give us some alternatives. So that's what I'm really trying to get the Christian community to sort of wake up.
Mhm.
It's like we've become so comfortable, sort of defaulting to everyone else to build the systems for us, and we just sort of have our little church meetings and and sing and talk about the Bible and all that, and we'll just leave all that up to the other guys.
Mhm.
Well, suddenly now we're finding ourselves being further, more and more backed into a corner.
And when you say that, what like you're kind of speaking, overarching, I see what you're saying, but like as a specific example, in what areas do you see us being backed into a corner as Christians living in this day and
Well, in the
age?
tech world, for sure, right? So the tech world, we're so far removed from that world, and now what's happening is one of the things I write about in the book is that if you take the top 5 tech companies, right, and you combine their net worth, they are the fifth large or fourth largest economy in the world.
Mhm.
Think about it. They're the fourth largest country
Mhm.
in the world.
Right.
And I tried to warn people about this last year. The power that they have
Mhm.
is so huge, and people didn't realize it. Well, what's happened in the last year through COVID is
Mhm.
we're all starting to realize right now just how much power they do have.
Right. Yeah.
I mean,
It's
when you
become very
think
clear.
about it, whether right or wrong, when one guy, Jack Dorsey, can decide on Twitter who he's going to keep and who he's not going to keep.
Mhm.
So here's what makes the world so interesting right now. If you think about history, in the ancient world, initially all information was transferred by being in each other's presence. We talked, right? Then we figured out how we could write stuff down on papyrus or stone, and information moved a little bit that way. Then Gutenberg developed the printing press, and we figured out how that could, right? So over the course of time, information has moved quicker and quicker. I
Mhm.
mean, I mean, if you think about it, your children right now probably have more knowledge of more things than a lot of the ancient people in the ancient world did. I mean,
Yeah.
we don't realize how much information, and the reason is because we have technology sitting in our hands called a cell phone,
Mhm.
through which we are. It's a walking 24-hour, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, little television. I mean, interesting story. Back in 1984, we had a church in Kansas City when you were little,
Mhm.
and the VP of sales from Sprint came to see me, and he told me something really interesting. And this is back in the day when
I
they were
wasn't
just
even born
working on
yet.
what?
I
You
wasn't
weren't
born
even
yet.
born. There you
No.
go. Well, cell phones were look like bricks. I mean, they were huge, right? And they
Mhm.
just had a a pad, a number pad on them. And he looked at me and he says, "There's a day coming when we will view the world through a little rectangle. Our
Mm.
whole view of the world is going to go through a rectangle." And he
Wow.
started telling me where things are going, and it's true, right? So what's happening now? If you think about this, never in the history of humanity have we had the capacity within a few minutes to reach more people instantaneously.
Mhm.
I mean, that's just unparalleled. I mean, that couldn't happen 20 years ago.
Right. We've already advanced a lot, and then in the crucible of 2020, it's gone even further. But I guess to your point, we've also it has served us in the sense that now we're aware of it, even though it was already progressing, and it would have continued to progress at some rate. A lot of people did not understand or believe, or even it just had they wouldn't have been able to understand or believe with their unless they saw it with their own eyes that they could be kicked off, canceled,
Right.
basically removed from the internet, from existence in the digital space or sphere, deplatformed, demonetized in 5 seconds flat if
Right.
these places want to. And that's been pretty crazy, I think, for a lot of people to watch just how the marginalized narrative of conservative wrong think in this liberal mainstream media world, it reigns, and and the conservative viewpoint it is slowly kind of being washed out or pushed down, or put at the back of the algorithm, basically kind of pushed out, which
Well,
is which is
we're not
concerning.
that, what I've tried to explain to people is what we're witnessing right now is not all that dissimilar from what happened in Germany after the
Mhm.
First World War and right before the Second World War.
Mhm. And a
And
lot of people have said that.
yeah, yeah,
I and
there's so few people that actually study history.
yeah.
But if you really go back and you look what was happening in the culture, it got to a point where there was an elite few
Mhm.
that were telling everyone where to look, what to see, how to interpret it. There was
Yes.
we call it
Yes.
political correctness. They didn't have that term back in the 1930s, but
Yeah.
there was a PC-ness. And
Yeah.
if you didn't fit within that PC realm, you were ostracized or eliminated. I mean, that in the worst case scenario, you were eliminated.
Right.
And in many cases, you were ostracized.
Mhm.
And what concerns me deeply, we were talking about this earlier. I don't have a problem with technology. Technology is neither good nor evil.
Right.
It's just technology. What I have a problem with is the human soul, because we have a default setting towards self-centeredness and selfishness.
Yeah.
And that selfishness, I did a talk last year about the epidemic of narcissism, that we're in a state culturally,
Mhm.
that we're all talking about COVID, but there's actually been an a disease called narcissism that's infiltrated our whole culture. We've become very self-centered,
Mhm.
self-focused. That's actually what's fragmenting our culture right now. It's all about me. So
Right.
what's going on right now though is that in this self-centeredness is always the drive to control. It's not new. It's been there for thousands of years.
Mm-hmm.
There's always been a few that have wanted to control the many.
Yeah.
So that's not a new phenomena. So, some of the things that I'm addressing in the book, it wasn't like, I had some great prophetic revelation. I'm a sociologist. I study human behavior, and this has been human behavior for thousands of years. What's changed is never before in the history of the world have the elite few who want to control the many had more power to do so. They have
Right.
not only the motive, they have the means now.
Right.
And so I
That's an
was
important
explaining this to
differentiation.
somebody today
Mm-hmm.
that and I know people feel it, but they don't always know exactly what's going on. But within our universities, within the Davos crowd, um, there is a mindset, and the mindset is that because we've either been successful in business, we've been successful in politics, or we're an academic, we're smarter than you. And
Mm-hmm.
it's actually um, a new form of Aryanism. Remember, Aryanism was the whole Nazi thing, that there was
Yeah.
this race of people that was superior.
Right.
Well, it's not race centric now, but there is a group of people, and it's that whole Davos crowd and the globalists who all believe that they're smarter than everyone else
Mm-hmm.
and that they need to save the rest of us from ourselves because we're all idiots.
Right. You get that vibe from Bill Gates as well, who thinks
Yeah.
that he needs to save the world from the people that inhabit it.
Well, and it's so interesting because once you see it, and I've been behind the scenes, I've sat in those meetings and I've listened, and it's just shocking because it's so normal. Like, we talk about subculture, norms, and there is
Mm.
a subculture within the elite that's so normal to them they don't even realize it, but they're delusional because they don't see. So one of the, like, here, what's interesting, like one of the guys that really fascinates me is Elon Musk,
Yeah. Because
right?
he's not that way.
Elon Musk, no, but here's the paradox. Elon Musk is one of the guys who, like me, is warning people about the dangers of unreined in technology, right? He's one of the ones that have basically told people, we're dancing with the devil.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, who's one of the guys pushing technology? He
Right.
is. And reason for it is his ego.
Right.
He wants the status, right?
Right.
Of being one of those guys that was the first to do something. And so one of the tensions you have in what's developing right now is you have a whole bunch of guys who are so driven by their egos to be the guy that comes up with this cutting edge technology, blah, blah, blah. But none of them are actually stopping to think about the consequences. They don't care. They're not concerned with that. They're considered their only concern is being lauded as being a pioneer, the guy that was
Mhm.
on the cutting edge, getting their awards, getting their name in the history books. I was the guy that, you
Right.
know,
Which goes back to your commentary earlier on the human nature and the selfishness and sinfulness, obviously the depravity of man, that we understand that without God, that is going to be the default setting, and that is what we're seeing unfold. So, bringing it kind of to what people have been experiencing lately, with obviously the cancellation of Parler, the conservative like alternative platform, to the censorship of Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. um that's still down, like they're still not even back up. So
right,
obviously we've seen that big tech has a huge role in our experience as just humans, as conservatives, as Christians, as anyone really who does not fit what you were describing as that PC. If you have a thought, if you have a thought that doesn't fit, the new speak, and then it's wrong think, according to Orwell's 1984. And so what role does, are we going to continue to see big tech play in the future? I mean, I know you can't predict the future, but you have studied this and you have written about it. But what do you kind of envision continuing to develop here?
Well, I mean, I think I think we're almost at a breaking. I mean, there's a certain point here where the Christian community is going to have to diverge. You know, we've been living in the world and been very content
Mm,
in this space, but we're reaching a point where our values, our morals, and our ethics, which are the foundation stones of the kingdom of God, are in direct opposition to
right.
what's happening. So one of the things I talk about in the book, which is coming, it's not here yet, but it's coming quickly, is that within the world of technology, they too believe humanity is the weak link
Mm,
in the evolutionary cycle.
right.
And what they are believe is that we need to develop artificial intelligence. And the reason being is that artificial intelligence has the capacity plugged into the internet to process all knowledge. I mean, if you think about this, Google is has committed the biggest theft of intellectual knowledge of anybody in history, right?
Mm-hmm.
In other words, and they're making a fortune off of other people's information. But all that information is stored. And so what there's this sort of delusion, and I write about it in the book, that they've even started it. Like some of these guys are starting a church and they believe that they are creating God, that they are creating the ultimate being. I mean, they think they're creating a being who and because of the fact it's artificial intelligence, that it will be unbiased and fair. And I quote in my book some of the speeches that these AIs have even given at the UN, where they've actually told people, you need to let go and let us make the decisions because we're smarter and fairer than you.
Wow.
And so that's where things are headed. That I mean, in there's a whole drive, and this is what's going on behind the scenes. So what I tried to warn people about in the book, I said, you watch what happens, because right now AI is sci-fi, but
Mhm.
within the next decade, it's going to be so integrated into our daily lives. I posted the thing this week on Facebook where Google actually has told all of their people to only let stuff that reflects positively on AI out. I
Wow.
mean, they're controlling the narrative that this is wonderful, that we're creating this. I mean, and people don't even realize it, but you call into, you know, some of these companies like Spectrum or AT&T or whatever, you're talking to AI.
Right.
That's an AI that's processing what's going on. And then at a certain point, they may turn it over to a human being, but everything's moving in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason being, one of the, so it's about fairness, but the other reason behind it is that we're in a situation where our value system is so skewed that efficiency is at the top of the food chain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, but again, this was a trait. This was Germany 1930 efficiency, right? They were I mean, if you go to the Nuremberg trials, the Germans were all confused as why the rest of the world was so upset with them, because they were so good at what they did.
Hmm.
They were
Wow.
like bragging about how efficient they carried out the genocide. They
Right.
were completely oblivious to the fact that this was a reprehensible moral and ethical problem.
Right.
And we're in that same space within the tech world right now. They don't have, there's not a moral ethical foundation here. The people that are
Right.
driving this do not even have a spiritual worldview.
No.
They see humanity as bits and bytes.
Yeah.
I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they're looking, right. I mean, there was a whole thing this week where Microsoft is actually working on the capacity to download all of you, your life, your story, everything into a robot so that your relatives after you die can still communicate with you.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, I posted some stuff today about this. We're at, I mean, so you got robotics and you've got AI, and the two things are what COVID's done is accelerate the whole robotics industry. I mean, it's accelerated its development already now in Europe. It's robots that are actually waiting on the COVID patients. They send in the robots with the meds. You're going to see robots everywhere. And then
Mm.
watching the next 24 months, you're going to see robots everywhere.
That makes my stomach sick. Like, does that not like? I mean, does that freak you out? Like, I feel like that's just very concerning.
Well, again, I've been aware of this for 5 years, so I've been dealing with it. But yes, I totally understand it. I mean, I get it. It's got a lot of people. It's going to cause a lot of people to rethink some things, and I don't want to sugarcoat this. We're going to have to make some choices about how we want to live.
Yeah. So,
And
yeah,
those
go ahead.
choices, I remind people all the time, the choices you make are actually based on the foundation of your values. What you
Mm,
have to actually stop and take stock of is, what do I value? Like, what's important to me? In the tech world, at the top of their value system is efficiency.
mhm. Yeah.
In other people, it's relationship.
Mhm.
And other people, it's quality of life, right? So based, there's all kinds of different things. And what I guess part of the reason I tried to get this book out is I want people to stop and think. Like, you can't wait. It's not, things are unfolding so quickly, and you have to make life choices right now, because you're going to be pushed into a corner. You're not going to have choices. There's a certain point where you're not going to have choices. And what you're talking about with Parler, what's happening with Twitter, what we're seeing with the tech, I mean, they're the arbitrators of our morality, our ethics, and our
Right.
values.
Well, and they're the platforms that, it's been unreal to watch how quickly and swiftly they remove and, add the warning label and prevent you from seeing the image they don't want you to see and say warning sensitive content when it's like a picture. There was one, you probably saw this, like Santa bowing at Jesus's cradle.
Mm,
This had a sensitive image. It was like there was nothing bad about the image. It was like, I mean, I wouldn't say it was something I loved, but the point being, it was around Christmas and it was like, the point of Christmas is Jesus and Santa is realizing that, so it was sort
right.
of like a tongue in cheek kind of thing. And anyways, it had this warning label over it. It's just been crazy to see how effective they are at, gating any content they don't want you to see. And
Right.
yet, like, child pornography is still rampant. And I mean, Instagram has all of these terrible, very sketchy and outright, I mean, accounts that are posting, you can tell they're definitely minors, maybe
Mm.
not, completely nude, but like at least very suggestive, very inappropriate things that should not be online. And you report them, and I have, if people send me stuff because of my platform, they'll send me, check out this account, report them, we're trying to get them, take them down. You report them, and Instagram immediately sends you a response in your notifications that says, this does not violate our platform standards, this does not
I
violate our
know.
community
You're like,
standards.
what?
And it's like, but a conservative viewpoint, or saying
Right.
election integrity is important, or anything else that might be considered kind of against the mainstream narrative, those are things that are just so swiftly and efficiently, like you said, taken out of the game, that it's like, oh wow.
Well,
So
it's like the whole COVID thing, right? Remember when there was all this discussion early on about that? What is that, hydrochlor, whatever that?
hydroxychloroquine, yes, yes,
Exactly, right? And so if you said anything
yes,
different
right,
than their narrative, it got
got
blocked,
taken
right?
down, yeah.
Right. And then like a month or so, or a few months back, the medical journals that all were anti this suddenly come out and go, oh, well, actually, we were wrong.
Yeah. Right.
But did anybody hear about that? Did
No.
any of these social media platforms who blocked everyone and told you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So again, who is arbitrating what's true here?
Right.
And what you realize is you've got a small group of people who are ideologues, right? Who
Mhm.
have so they're biased. And one of the things I read about in the book is one of the problems they're having with AI is they believe that AI is going to be unbiased, but they keep finding bias,
Mhm.
right? Well, it's human beings, and we're all very biased.
Right. We can't get outside of our own bias. Like, that's just the crazy thing that they somehow, like you said earlier, well, we're more fair than you. I mean, fairness is not even a real, it's not even a real concept. Like, it's
Right,
not a biblical concept. Like, you've got justice, but that isn't even fair.
right.
Fair and justice is just what is right, but it's not actually what is fair, because what is fair is that we all like burn in hell forever, and that isn't God's definition, of justice. He actually provides justice through Jesus Christ, and makes us right. But like just all the definitions and the concepts that are just so misconstrued and distorted provide such a poor foundation for all of these decisions that they're making on top of it. And it's just, we're getting further and further away from the truth and from reality even. And then
So
obviously,
so that's the negative side, right?
right.
Here's the positive side.
Okay, you got to help me because I'm not really seeing the positives here.
Okay. So what did Parler learn? They learned a powerful lesson. They
They need
were
to
like the
host,
rest of us,
right?
presumptuous. And they put their platform on Amazon's servers. They gave up control.
Hmm.
Had they had their own servers and their own server farm and their own stuff, Amazon would have had no power to stop it.
Right.
So what I keep trying to get people to understand is all of these it's like these in some ways, God's being merciful. It's like there's all these red flags going up. Like we're getting all these warning signs, and God's screaming at the top of his lungs, right?
Mm.
There's opportunity. So I tell you a story. This is an interesting story. When I was 11, we were studying the Great Depression in school. Well, my grandfather was a stockbroker in Chicago during the Great Depression.
Mhm.
So I'm a morbid 11-year-old. I'm going to go down to Chicago and talk to my grandpa about the people jumping out the window, because that's what we all were like, like, wow, like people were killing themselves, right? So we drive down to Chicago. I asked my grandpa, I go, hey, grandpa, you were there when this all happened. Like, were people jumping out the window? And he goes, oh, yeah, yeah, that happened. He goes, but I need to tell you something, son. I said, what's that? He goes, a lot of people became millionaires because of the Depression.
Mm.
I said, what? He goes, you never heard of that story, do you? And he goes, I go, no, you're kidding me. And he goes, yeah. He goes, all those people that had cash, he goes, they were buying after the stock market crash, they were buying depreciated
Mm.
assets for pennies on the dollar. They were buying buildings and land. I mean, because people were just hemorrhaging, right? And so people were just the banks. I mean, everybody was just trying to get rid of stuff, and they just bought it all up. And he goes, within 10 years, that all that land, all that equipment, all those buildings, he goes, it was worth millions
Mm.
because they thought ahead. So what I'm trying to get people to understand is there's pushback coming. Christians are going, oh my, oh my, oh my. Well, think about this. We have opportunity here.
Mhm.
Create our own systems. If we don't want to be controlled by Twitter, we don't want to be controlled by Amazon, we don't want to be controlled by Apple, we don't, right? The big five, Google, then we need to create our own alternative systems.
So does that look like, okay, that means we have to have, because this kind of this thinking how does it not lead to having our own ecosystem completely separate from the world? And then does that then lead us to a place where we are now not in and not of? We're not in, not of, we're just not in and not of. You know what I mean? As
Well, we're
believers. So
just not completely dependent. And
mhm,
and depending on where things go, we may not have a choice. See, this is the great unknown.
mhm,
So, I mean, and I don't want to get all apocalyptic here, but we've got some religious communities, the Hutterites, the Amish, the Mennonites, people like that. Well, people forget that the reason that those religious communities got isolated was because during the Reformation of Martin Luther, they decided that they were going to pour water over each other's head and get rebaptized. And for that reason, they were considered heretics and everybody tried to kill them. So they fled into the mountains. And these were the reformers that were killing them. So there are moments. I mean, and you saw this all the way through the Roman Empire. I mean, there are moments where the Christian community, just for survival, does have to isolate. We're not there yet, but I still tell people, I said, just think this through. 100 years ago, 70% of our population lived in the rural areas and were self sufficient. Now 2% feed the other 98%, and nearly within the next decade, 70% of our population will be in the urban areas. Well, when you live in the urban areas, guess what you're dependent on? Systems
mhm.
that other people run, which are all moving towards AI right now. And the reason why, because it's more efficient.
Right.
There's a reason why they're putting fiber around all these cities. There's a reason why 5G is coming. 5G is the super highway that AI runs on. AI is a data hawk. It uses massive amounts of information. It just, it needs huge pipes, as it were. And that's what 5G is and why they're putting 5G up everywhere. Well, that's because where they're headed with everything is they want everything run, our whole electrical grid, our sewer systems, our stoplights, everything in the city they want to run on AI.
Mhm.
They want the whole system on AI. Well, now what are they doing? Well, guess what? If you've watched what's been going on with this whole thing and this riot in Washington, the way they got all these people that were there is they're using facial recognition technology. I think it's Clearview is the company. They've got like 5 billion images of people. So
Mhm.
the police departments are using, you know, facial recognition technology. I mean, people
Right.
don't realize you walk into an airport, they're already scanning you.
Right.
Every airport's there's already an AI in the background. We already have our defense system has got a massive AI called Sentient that actually is constantly, you know, monitoring everything. They started doing this facial recognition down in New Orleans a number of years ago. They're using it now. They want to, how you these doorbells where they have the little video thing. You know what I'm talking
Ring.
about?
Yeah. Yeah.
Where you can see on your phone who's at the
Right.
door.
Right.
The police departments are wanting to tap into that now.
I thought they already could. No.
No, not some in some places, yes, but I mean, like to become a normal thing. Well, no human being's going to sit there and monitor all this, right?
Right. Right.
You need a machine. So all of your urban areas are going to within a decade be run by AI.
Mhm. So
And the
then
way you operate your life, the way you interact, it's all going to be AI driven, facial recognition, biometric
mhm.
stuff.
So then, like, where do you see, how does a Christian determine, where to draw the line? Like what like you mentioned morals, ethics, and values. I mean, some of those things are given to us as absolutes in scripture, and others are somewhat up to our conscience to determine
Right.
for our family, like for instance, a vaccine. it's your choice. If at least for now, it is your choice whether or not you choose to protect yourself in that way by getting a vaccine. It's an advancement of technology, and if you want to partake in it and you look at the numbers and you do it, and otherwise, if you're convicted otherwise, you don't have to. So, I mean, do you look at some of this stuff as gray area for believers,
Well,
or
I think we all got to make our own choices,
Mhm.
but I'm a little older now, from my experiences, I would say it's always wise to have a plan B.
Mhm.
In other words, always always have a way out. In other words, and we're seeing that. It's what happened with Parla. It's happened with a lot of people. There was no plan B.
Mhm.
And somebody in power suddenly pulled the plug and you're gone.
Right. Right.
And there's no plan B.
So
Be-
like
eh,
yeah. So if you take that to like, down to someone living in a home on the grid in a little HOA neighborhood like mine, and let's say in 10 years they've tied my online presence and my opinions and my religious views to my electricity, and if I say the wrong thing, my electricity gets shut off or my water
yeah,
gets turned off,
I know.
that sort of a thing where it's like you've got,
Well, have you seen so this is, I mean, I know you're on top of this stuff, but have you noticed what's going on in Washington right now?
I have
It's
not looked
not
into
the
it real
fact that
deep.
you're a conservative. You are now a radical. You are
Mhm.
problematic.
Mhm.
You are dangerous to
Right.
our country.
Mhm.
You see, I mean, you see this coming out in the statements. There's a whole
Oh,
viewpoint.
Washington, D.C. I thought you meant
Yeah.
Washington State. Okay.
No, sorry, Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You see what's going on? It's the same thing. So, again, if you use our analogy with Nazi Germany, it was those Jewish people.
Right.
They're the reason that we have these problems.
Mhm.
And you see this happen all through history, that there's a group of people that tend to be, the sacrificial lambs. We're going to blame them for the problem. And right now you're seeing it. It and what's really frightening about it is the hypocrisy, the duplicity, and the double standards, because the people pointing the fingers have all been doing the same thing.
Of course. And I mean, the crazy thing is it's like under the guise of, they're how Biden just reversed Trump's order to quit teaching critical theory in
Right.
government, trainings and all of that. Well, now that is we've got the education piece back in place now to continue to indoctrinate future generations as well. And
Right.
that's happening in schools as well. I mean, I know that curriculum is just going crazy towards liberalism and secularism.
Right.
And so it's almost like, man, where does it end? Does this really turn into another Nazi Germany situation, or is there going to be some sort of a turn in the tide? We've got, obviously, in the United States, we've got checks and balances hypothetically, but right now we have fewer of those because of how the election went. And so we're in kind of a challenging spot where it's like, we can maybe ride it out for a couple of years if things don't progress too much, but who knows? I mean, with
Well,
40
exactly. So,
executive orders in like 2 weeks, like, that we could be in another country in 2 years, you know?
well, again, though, I'm a I mean, sociology is my passion. If you look across the world in Eastern cultures like China, the population's compliant, right? It's a very authoritarian structure. I mean, all the way from the way the
Yeah,
family structure is, right? So in China, where you have over 1 billion people, right? They're very used to somebody in authority saying, this is what you do. And everybody lines up and goes, yes, sir.
right.
It's the same way in Europe. I could tell you a
Mhm.
bunch of stories of experiences I had there in the music business where the population defaults to people in authority.
Right.
America, and this is one of the things that is kind of what do you call it, a subplot of what's going on right now at the global level, is America's unruly. Americans are fiercely independent. Well, I
Mhm.
shouldn't say America. At least half of the population is fiercely independent. There's a
Yeah.
whole I write about it in the book that there's a whole part of our population that actually doesn't want to be responsible for any decisions and will default to people in authority so that they can be responsible.
Mhm.
There's another half of the population that's like, don't you dare make decisions for me.
Mhm.
And in our culture, historically, I mean, you got to remember our nation was actually birthed in rebellion.
Right.
Like we just went, no, we're not doing that.
Mhm.
And that's still in us.
Yeah,
That's
for
still in
sure.
our cultural DNA. So that's the unknown in terms of our own country right now, where this is all going to head. It's very likely, based on what I see, that we're headed for huge conflict. Like this thing is going to get really ugly.
Mm. That's like
That
strikes
wouldn't be the
fear in the
case
heart
in
of many.
China. You wouldn't see
Right.
that in Europe. You're not going to see that. But there's a population. There's a population here, a significant amount of the population that doesn't like what's going on. That's why you're seeing what's going. They are terrified in Washington of that group of people.
Right.
They're terrified. I mean, I'm not a big Trump guy. I didn't never really like the guy's personality, but they're terrified of him.
Mhm. Which is
They're
why so many Americans love him, because he's been one of the few,
Yeah, but
if not the
they're
only, to stand up to
terrified of
him.
his influence. They
Right.
they are doing everything they can to cut him off at the knees
Mhm.
because they're terrified of his independence, his freedom. So if you think about this from the globalist point of view, which is what's going on, we're the reason why America has to be brought down
Mhm.
is because we're kind of like the wild black sheep cousin. We don't fit nice and neatly in the rest of the world's sort of cultural compliance.
Right. We buck the system.
We
And if
buck
you're
the
if
system.
you're familiar with the Great Reset, then we really buck the system.
You got it. You see what's going on right now. So that's the battle that's going on here, and you're going to see this over the next 4 years. There's going to be a huge battle here because the whole idea is we've got to basically take. There's going to be a constant push to get the wildness out of us, the independence
Mhm.
out of us.
When you say battle, are you talking Civil War? Are you talking
Well, that. I mean, that's the
military battle?
ultimate. I hope it doesn't come to that. But depending on how far they push
Mhm.
and and who's in power. I mean, that there's a war going on right now. I mean, a
Mhm.
huge war to silence any
Right.
sort of opposition
I don't know if you
to
read
the
Rod.
narrative.
Right. Did you read Rod Dreher's book, Live Not by Lies?
No, I haven't yet, but I've talked to him a few times because he loved my book and I've loved his stuff, the Benedict option.
Yeah. I've not read that one, but yeah, that you would
Well, the
love Live
Benedict
Not by
option
Lies.
addresses what you were talking about earlier about lifestyle choices.
Mhm. Yeah, and Live Not by Lies is kind of I think a continuation, not a continuation, but it is about, how Christians survived in communist Russia and the Eastern Bloc, and
Mm,
how they really went underground and just refused the totalitarianism by continuing to hold to their beliefs, and they
right.
rejected um the pressures around them. And what's really interesting is that I think I forgot what I was gonna say here. I think that his view. Oh, he said that really the war was not going to be one that was as blatant and in our faces as, the civil war
Mm,
that we had on this land. It was actually going to be more of a soft totalitarianism where
mm.
you would be coerced into the action they want you to take by making your life hard, or removing your access from going to the grocery store, or making it, so that you couldn't fill your car up with gas or whatever. And basically pressuring you into either following the rules, doing what you're supposed to do. I mean, obviously they can't really make you believe anything, but they can sure change how you live your life. And
Well, it's
so,
like the My Pillow guy. I don't really know
yeah,
that whole story, right? But
right,
now all of these department stores have taken his product out.
right.
And you're like, really?
Mm.
You may not like his ideology or how he thinks or who he supports, but to literally, take his product out of your stores.
Right.
Wow.
Crazy.
I mean, I mean, wow. I mean, that's just, when you think about the ramifications of that, right?
Yeah.
But we're seeing it. We're seeing how that, whole, people suddenly canceled, products canceled, you know what I mean? Companies canceled.
Hmm.
It's a very dangerous situation we're in.
So what is your recommendation? How do you encourage people? Because I know that you're not all doom and gloom. And obviously you live your life every day. You're not cowering in your house, hiding from facial recognition software or whatever. But
No.
but what do you encourage people to do in light of what you see coming?
Well, again, you know, understanding how God works, there's opportunity in crisis. You just have to have eyes to see. And I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Schindler's List,
Mm-hmm.
right? In Schindler's List, there's a funny scene that's not really germane to the movie, but they're all like in the ghetto, right? They're all in the ghetto. And I don't know what it was. Somebody needed, cigarettes or something. And this little Jewish guy like goes down in the sewer. He's got a whole stash in the sewer, right, of products.
Mm-hmm.
And I laughed. I laughed out loud. I felt so embarrassed in the theater. But that's so Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're like like they've been rounded up by the Nazis. They've lost everything, and this guy is still figuring out a way how to make money, how
Yeah.
to do opportunity. The Jewish people have been doing that for thousands of years. They have this amazing capacity to see in crisis an opportunity. And
Mm-hmm.
it's something that we've sort of lost. It's like the thing that I fear is we've become so soft. We've
Yeah.
become so like we've become so cushy in our American prosperity, and we just default to everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone else does, and then we just like, oh, it's just it. And one other thing, I'll just give you one word that is going to be a challenge: convenience.
Yeah.
See, we like convenience.
I know you're talking about Amazon there.
Yeah, it's convenient, right?
Yeah.
But if we're going to stick to our values, we might have to be inconvenient.
Right.
And that's like, huh? That's
Right.
hard. Those are some hard choices because being inconvenienced is not something we like. I see this all the time when you're out there and things don't go right for people. And I like throw hissy fits. Because it's like our expectation, we expect to be waited on, we expect this to be on time, we expect, right? It's just we just are so live in such a culture where we have such strong infrastructure and everything runs so smoothly that everything is convenient.
Right. Mm.
And unless you get out of here and you travel the world like I have and you get to other places and you suddenly realize, oh my God, I live in nirvana. It's like, just wow, life is so easy. There's so little resistance.
Yeah.
But I travel all over. I'm in Africa, and I mean, just the simplest thing is complicated.
Yeah.
Just getting gas, you have to sit in line for 3 hours. You know what I mean? It's like you go to the grocery store. We have an whole aisle of cereal, and you go to Africa, and you got one white box with black letters says cornflakes. that's
Uh,
that's it. You see what I mean?
wow.
It's like
Right.
there's so many things that we're used to, and I just think there's a wake up call. There's a shot been fired across the bow last year to the church. COVID, for all of its negative and depressing and heaviness that it's brought, it's been a shot across the bow to the Christian community to
Mm-hmm.
wake up and quit looking to everyone else for solutions. Figure some out. Like, why don't you be come up with something original? So, more and more as the few try to control the many, people are going to look for alternatives. There's
Mm-hmm.
going to be opportunities for innovation and for business to supply, because there's going to be a niche market.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you see that all the time in other little things. And it's a little niche market for people that don't want to be a part of that. So Amazon right now, I mean, they've just taken over everything. I mean, that it's frightening to me how much influence they have.
Yeah. It is. But it's like, does a Christian go and create an alternative Amazon, or do we all just have to go in person and buy everything we need,
Right.
But
And you
yeah,
can,
that's like
right. And
like
that's
you're
the same
saying.
thing. And and I tell people really, I mean, living outside of the city is an inconvenience.
Hmm.
It's an inconvenience, but it's also independence.
Right. Yeah. Man, some very challenging things to think about for sure, but I think that you're right that believers do need to at least stop and think. We really do. If you're not stopping to think after everything that's happened, you're probably just being foolish or putting your head in the sand, and pretending not to know. Do you have any like kind of parting words of wisdom or advice? What, for someone who's feeling a little bit overwhelmed by this conversation, maybe it's the first time they've thought about it. What would be something that you would say for them to focus on first?
Well, I know people don't want to hear this, but it's the truth. If you're a Christian, the reality of it is that Christianity flourishes under resistance.
So
That we
true.
actually get in trouble when it's all going good.
That's so true.
The, Revelations talks about the Laodicean church. And I've tried to explain to people that the harder you press on the kingdom of God, the more it grows.
Mm,
Resistance builds strength.
mm-hmm. That's good.
So
Yeah.
I am of the perspective that the more we see resistance against our community, our values, our morals, our ethics, our worldview, the stronger we're going to become.
Yeah. I see that too. I mean, even just on a personal level, I've seen that over the last year. So I would
I tried to
imagine.
warn all my ministry colleagues in my book that the expression of Christianity was going to change and that they'd be wise to move away from the large building centric sort of Sunday show thing and think more of smaller, you know, relational.
Mhm.
And nobody believed me. They all went like, no, 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 right? And then COVID hit, and they're all like, oh, hey, Bob.
Yeah.
And so there's incredible opportunity right now because one of the things that people are realizing, because remember, resistance builds strength. You know how much people are starting to value their relationships?
Mm-hmm. So true.
Suddenly they have value right now, right? And the reason is because so many of them have been taken away from us.
Right.
The ones that we do have suddenly taken on great value. So this is why, if I could give you words of wisdom, it's to realize that for every negative thing, there's a positive thing.
Mm-hmm.
There's actually, it's like, I know this, gets into some deep philosophy, but if you think about the way God made creation, there's these diametric forces, right? Light and dark, good
Mhm.
and evil, right? You have all the right, and we live between these things. And
Mhm.
so the reason why good is because of evil. Like without evil, we would have no concept of what good looks like, right?
Mhm.
So sometimes the negative things that we face are actually God's way of showing us how valuable and precious the good things are.
Mhm.
And you see this, and it's like this all the way through life. We all of a sudden, it's at funerals where we appreciate our lives more. We suddenly have this sense of value about I'm alive.
Mhm.
I mean, have you ever talked to somebody that's had terminal illness and been healed of it? They live every day with this sense of gratitude, and they suck the marrow out of life because they know what it's like to almost have lost it.
Right.
So I'm just saying we're in a season right now where it appears that there's a lot of negative things happening, but there's some really incredibly good things that are happening. And the amazing thing about it is God always shows up in the most incredible ways. It's just that you have to look at things differently. So,
Mhm.
one of the questions that I've always asked myself is what was it that Simeon and Anna had that they recognized in the voice of a little child in the temple the purposes of God?
Mhm.
Everybody else just saw a little baby. Those two old people heard in that cry the purpose of God, and they recognized that there was purpose there. That's what we've got to have in this hour. We have to be able to see the hand of God moving in things that are in its immaturity, right? And its small beginnings.
Yeah, man. That's some good stuff. That's really encouraging, and I think that that'll help people to not despair in light of the reality, because as we've seen, even in the crucible of 2020 and the terrible year that was, in a lot of ways, it was also a year filled with a lot of goodness and blessings. For all of the families that, like mine, were stuck together at home for a year. I mean, those were some of the our best memories as a family now, and
Mm-hmm.
so like you're saying, in everything there is an upside or a positive, and we know that to be true because of scripture, where God actually tells us and promises us that everything is working together for good, the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. So it's not necessarily true for unbelievers, but it is true for Christians and Christ followers, that he is working things for our ultimate good, even
Yeah.
if it means suffering in the meantime. So,
Yeah, that's right.
man, thank you so much, Bob. Where can people learn more about you, get your book, all of that?
Well, I have a website, which is www.jocomglobal.com, which is Joseph Company Global, but it's JOCO, Jocom, JCOM, and then global.com. And
Okay,
then the book is called In the Company of Joseph on Amazon.
perfect. All right.
Uh,
So they'll have to use Amazon to get the book,
Exactly.
but we all got to make some choices, right?
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate your time, and this has
All
been
right.
great.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me on the show, and I've enjoyed the conversation.
All right,
All
cool.
right.
Thank you so much. That's
All
great.
right.
I will probably air that in the next probably 3 to 4 weeks. So I'll
Okay.
definitely email you when it's going to go live. I'll send you links and stuff.
Well, edit out the rambling and condense it. And,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, yeah, it's great.
sometimes the way my brain works, I like them all over the place. So if I get too ADD, then you just cut, feel free to
Oh
edit
yeah,
out
no.
stuff.
That's good. Yeah, I'm the same way. I mean, I like to have more to work with anyway. So,
Okay.
all right. Well, thanks for
All
your
right,
time.
dear. Thank you
Okay.
again for the work you did on the book. And
Yeah, of
hopefully
course.
it will be, I mean, it's odd, even though I didn't get because of COVID, I wasn't able to get on any of the shows and do the tour, everything got canceled, the booked
Yeah.
everything. But what's happening now is more and more people are reading, and I've been getting letters from overseas. I mean, emails, a
Wow.
text from people just going, "Whoa!" So, and everybody
Wow.
loves the cover. So, good job.
Yeah, that's
All
awesome.
right.
Great. Okay,
Good
well, you
night.
have a good night.
All right. Bye bye.
All right.